Welcome to Vigilant News, everybody, for April 13th, 2022. I am Justin, host of Into the Storm. Host of Vigilant News. Ryan is out sick today, so I'm going to be covering the news for him. He was kind enough to do that for me while I was away in Arizona attending a wedding. So today we got some hot stories for you as usual. We have exclusive from probably the Gateway Pundit shared by Underground Newswire, really good news service. So check them out. It's all about George Soros-backed Media Matters claims to be a nonprofit, but acts like a biased far-left hit machine. Slow death of MSN, the mainstream media, NBC's Rachel Maddow to scale back to Mondays only. Oh, how sad. Arrest Bill Gates is roaring in a super protest, which has been heard at this protest, ascends outside of a TED Talk ahead of Gates' keynote speech. So it's good to see that people are protesting this TED Talk. We have an article. Well, I chose the article because it reveals footage from January 6th, but it also has some interesting remarks by Alan Dershowitz, who is representing one of the defendants of January 6th. We'll get into that today. There's a fantastic article by Dr. Joseph McCullough getting into technocracy and the programmable currency. Wanted to get into that as much as we could. That's an awesome topic. Lots to dive into there. You definitely want to check that out. And in the last article for the featured articles today, Biden had a bird poop on his head. No joke, that actually happened. Curious to see how often that actually happens to public officials. Seems like Biden is the recipient of a lot of interesting coincidences that could be interpreted symbolically. I'm not quite sure what the bird was, but if it's a dove or an eagle, I don't know if it was or not, but if it is, wow, talk about symbolic implications there. We'll get into a little bit of that. Then we got some interesting rapid fire. Musk is being sued by Twitter. Jesse Waters is talking about what the Dems are going to do if they lose the election. CNN Plus is failing epically, apparently. And another great story I'm only going to touch on briefly, but this probably deserves its own video. It's a story about guardianship, this idea that essentially you can be kidnapped or you can have all of your freedom stripped away under the guise of being the recipient of a guardianship or award, basically, that you're incompetent, you can't manage your affairs, you can't manage your life. So a parent, a family member, a friend, somebody is going to say, hey, I can be in guardianship of you. And essentially what that does is robs you of your freedoms entirely and can even compel you to do things. So it's literally equivalent to modern day slavery. We'll get into a little bit of that. If you haven't already done so, go to the Stillness in the Storm page. I'm actually going to pull this up for everybody because we have a campaign going right now for funding, and I am happy to report that we have reached our monthly goal. So if you're wondering, how do you donate to this thing? I've been mentioning it. Ryan's been mentioning it. This is one of the many ways you can donate. You can donate up here. Just to let you know, apparently this widget has been having problems. For those of you who've been trying to use this widget, my apologies. I have emailed the people. They're going to try to get back to me. There are multiple different ways you can donate. This here, if you click on donate now, it's going to bring you to this page. You can donate any amount you want. You can do it monthly or individually. And you can put in your credit card, debit card, all sorts of different ways you can donate there. And then obviously we have Cash App here. I put my personal Cash App here. You can even do snail mail. You just got to email me so I can give you my snail mail address. And then we have Bitcoin. So we got all sorts of different ways. And of course, we got PayPal and Subscribestar. Subscribestar is another place where you can go to get, where you can basically go to support us on a monthly basis. We try to post in there as much as we can. Admittedly, we've been a little light on the posting because we've been so swamped preparing for all of the stuff that we got going on. So I just wanted to let everybody know about that. We really appreciate your support. I cannot thank you enough, because if you aren't already aware, we lost a major source of funding last month. And if it wasn't for, frankly, me self-funding Stillness in the Storm, I've been taking the majority of my funds and, investing in Stillness in the Storm. One, because I value the work and I think it's important. And two, because it's one of the many ways that we can use to build what I think are better patriot in community style businesses. So, but I lost that funding. And frankly, running a media company, running a media service like we do here is not a for-profit industry. I don't even know if it should be a for-profit industry. That's a discussion for another time. But the point is that it's not like we're rolling in cash. All the money that you give us goes directly to paying our expenses and expanding the work so we can do more news, more coverage, more research, all the things that you guys know and love. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. All right, let's get into our first article today. We have the one about Mr. Soros, the man that everybody ostensibly loves to hate and probably should. This is posted by Jim Hoff at Gateway Pundit, as shared by Ryan Delarme from Underground Newswire, fellow founder of Vigilant News. Media Matters is a far-left organization that labels itself a nonprofit, but it works like a far-left hit machine. It has connections to George Soros, and its purpose appears to be to harm conservative Americans and take them out of business. I think this is absolutely the case. If you look at what Media Matters has been doing, they appear to be acting as the kind of let's see. I'm sure a lot of you have gone to high school, gone to various schools, or even just like summer camp. There's always that loud, obnoxious, bully type person, and almost invariably in almost any social group. Maybe we'll live in a world one day where that's not as much of a problem. And as a matter of fact, a little, shameless plug, Ryan, myself, and a couple other colleagues were actually creating an entity, a charity, specifically to help address this problem, because there's so many issues in our world that are just frankly related to the fact that we let children get abused, and subtly and directly, and that directly contributes to psychopathic behavior. So anyway, I kind of diverted here, but the point is that Media Matters appears to be like that. It's like the mean girls of the nation or the world. You get somebody who's willing to make up lies, slander, and then push that out as if it's gospel to defame a person's reputation. It's the worst form of toxic gossip you can imagine, because invariably they end up getting called out in their lies, but the damage is done at that point. Most of the way that the media works is Media Matter posts a story, they'll defame somebody, that'll spread around like wildfire. Either intentionally it'll be syndicated by the mainstream media or not, and then they print a retraction quietly, if at all, or they'll just delete the article or be like, whoops, sorry, we got that wrong. And they never actually do what they should do, which is they should attempt to repair the damage they did to somebody's reputation. But, so Media Matters is essentially a hit machine. I think that's a fair characterization. So in 2019, Forbes discussed the various distinctions between nonprofits. So this is important. The United States Internal Revenue Code, IRS, states that nonprofits are generally referred to as 501c organizations. There are more than 30 types of nonprofits under that code that qualify for the exemption of some form of federal income taxes. The two most basic types are the 501c3, that's the one everybody knows about, charitable organizations, and 501c4, social welfare organizations. There are key distinctions between the two types of entities. Now, for those of you who are like, man, is this really important? Do we really need to go into this? Well, it is, because part of the ways that these hit machines get the funding they need and get clout and social notoriety is because of official designations. I can tell you right now, having been in the business of receiving donations to fund public benefit work, which is basically what Stillness is, although it's not official, the fact that I don't have an official designation hinders my ability to fundraise. That's one of the reasons I've looked into charities, is because charities and foundations are a fantastic way to deal with a whole bunch of problems associated with gaining notoriety. And so what the cabal does, the globalists like to do, is they create a whole bunch of organizations. Can you think of any that might have been in the news recently that were implicated in effectively embezzling? Did any Black Lives Matter founders go and buy a whole bunch of $1 million mansions and even potentially engage in money laundering? You're damn right they did. Well, why is it that people spend money on these charities? Like if a bunch of hood rats got together and said, hey, we're going to fight for the Black rights, fight for rights of Black people, but they had no official designation, they had no charity, they had no 501c3 status, would people give to them? Probably not. But the very fact that you have a 501c3 status, in a lot of ways, is a kind of hypnotic association to tell people, hey, we're legit. You can give us money. So these things are really, really important. This is one of the what I like to call like secret tools or secret ways that the globalists like to do their work, something like that. So let's learn the distinction. Nonprofits, also known as charitable organizations, this is for 501c3, are what we think of, are what we often think of. They are the charities in need to reach out for help, and the public supports them with tax deductible donations. 501c3 are nonprofits. These 501c3 nonprofits are prohibited, so this is the important part, participating in or intervening in any political campaign on behalf of or in opposition to any candidate for elective public office. The 501c4 organizations account for social welfare, civic leagues, and local associations. These organizations promote community welfare, education, charitable, or recreational goals. Since the Supreme Court's Citizens United versus FEC decision, social welfare organizations have become a popular means for electoral involvement, often because of the privacy afforded to financial supporters. Because social welfare groups may engage in limited political activity, contributions are not tax deductible. While C4 organizations have become a popular method for campaign activity, politics cannot be the entity's primary purpose. Impermissible political activity by nonprofits carries risk on multiple levels. Not only could an entity's tax-exempt status be jeopardized, but the conduct that constitutes an impermissible campaign contribution may carry civil and criminal penalties. So the punchline to all this, the important part about this is that if you have a 501c3 or C4 organization, I'm fairly certain it's any 501c3 designation, we just listed 2 of the 30, then you are potentially conducting illegal activities. You cannot use your tax sheltered status, because effectively that's what it is, although they don't like to use that term. You don't pay taxes when you got a charity or foundation. So that means you can use all that money, you can pay your expenses, and effectively you don't have to pay taxes, which is pretty big. But you can't use that not only the official designation, but also the funds associated with your organization, because you don't have taxes, to go and conduct political activities. I don't have time to get into all the nitty-gritty, deeper lawful principles, which is fascinating, but I'll just say that there are various organizations that conduct what we could say illegal activities, and this guy's organization's Media Matter appears to be one of them. Media Matters for America. So there's a lot more to this. I'm not going to have time to go into it, but that's the basic gist of it. So I'm just going to keep moving on to the next one. Of course, if you got any questions or anything, feel free to pop them in the chat and I'll get to them. So for our next story, we have the slow death of the mainstream media. Isn't that the truth? MSNBC's Rachel Maddow to scale back to Mondays only. Rachel Maddow on Monday announced that she will step back from her MSNBC show next month with plans to only be on air 1 day per week. She told her audience that starting in May, she will only present Mondays and will oversee a broader range of NBC Universal's projects instead. Variety reported, quote, "I do still have all these other irons in the fire, all these other things I'm working on that I want to bring to fruition. None of them are fast. All of them take a long time, and I'm still working on all of them," the MSNBC anchor told her audience on Monday. Now, one thing that's interesting about this is that she's one of a handful of people who had to admit essentially that she totally dropped the ball with the Russiagate situation, and she essentially was pushing fake news, although she didn't say it that way. I'm fairly certain this was done in a court order or some type of court proceeding, similar to what happened with Facebook when their Facebook fact checkers had their feet held to the fire and said, "Hey, you're not actually fact checking anything. What's going on here?" And they said, "Oh, well, you're right. Yeah, sorry about that. We're not actually fact checkers. We're just opinion moderators, basically." So it's huge. I mean, the level of deception, malfeasance, breach of contract, and breach of trust, in my mind, that happens in these organizations is criminal and so glaringly obvious. It's like trying to eat a food at a restaurant and you essentially find a piece of feces in your food. It's like, it should be that glaring of a situation. The fact that we don't see these things as easily is just proof of how effective the globalists' mind influencing programs are. But this is huge, and it's not entirely what is huge is that these things don't get noticed. Whether or not Rachel Maddow is actually leaving for the reason she stated, I don't know, but I'm leaning the idea that the reason she's leaving isn't so much because she's got all these projects in the fire and she's such a hot commodity that she has to develop them. It's because nobody's watching her show. Nobody wants to hear a woman tell them more lies. So we got Arrest Bill Gates roaring in a massive super protest that ascends outside of a TED Talk ahead of Gates' keynote speech. Now, mind you, Gates, I think there's 2 different TED Talks, or I might have that wrong, but there's definitively one TED Talk where Bates is effectively saying, hey, one of the ways that we can deal with the population growth problem, I'm not so sure it's a problem, but this is what he frames it as. He's not the only one. A lot of other prominent globalists also think there's a problem with overpopulation, is through vaccination. I don't know if you knew this, but the decade of 2010 to 2020 was apparently the decade of vaccines. They wanted to stick a needle in everybody's arm and give them vaccines. And they did a tremendous amount of work. There's a fantastic documentary, Who is Bill Gates, by James Corbett and several other people. They produced a phenomenal documentary. You can actually go to, I believe it's thecorbettreport.com/Gates, and you can not only see the video, but you can look at the entire transcript with all of the links and resources. Those guys did such a good job putting that together. I got to hand it to them. So it was admitted in that or it was revealed, I should say, in that documentary that Gates has spent billions of dollars trying to get vaccines in people's bodies. And you don't have to be a genius to know, like with the people like Yuval Noah Harari, one of the gurus, the self-proclaimed prophet for the World Economic Forum. I don't know if he's self-proclaimed, but he's associated with it. They call him the prophet of the World Economic Forum, the prophet of the Great Reset, things like this. Well, he's talking about internal surveillance through vaccines. So you got to wonder what the hell's going on here. Well, this is kind of what happened. So let's take a listen to this video here and see if the video has anything on it. Let's go. Well, that's the protest anyway. There was no people screaming, arrest Bill Gates, but perhaps we can see some of that here. This looks like the Canadian guy that we've seen before. Let's see.
One of amazing speakers. The next speaker is one of the most notorious freedom fighters in our beautiful country, and he needs
that's him.
Go crazy for the one and only Chris Guy.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I believe, yeah, let's try this video. The guy that they were just about to have on, I'll let you watch that video on your own. Pretty sure he's Canadian. I think he's from Toronto. Awesome guy. He ran into an airport back when COVID initially started and was essentially telling people, you can't make me wear a mask, and they didn't. So that was pretty cool. All right, so let's see if this has the phrase that we're looking for here. Arrest Bill Gates. That's a lot of people. That is a lot of people screaming arrest Bill Gates. So, I think that's pretty damn good news. It's good news because, frankly, it appears as though Bill Gates might be, at least the one that we know of, one of the most guilty people out there with respect to the assault on human health, the assault on human sovereignty. Mind you, Bill and Melinda Gates put on the Event 201, which happened, I want to say, several months before COVID broke out. And essentially, it was that war game scenario, Event 201, and the policies that were put forth there, although they had been developing the policies apparently for years, that guided how we responded to the COVID situation. So we can thank Bill Gates for massive upticks in suicide, massive issues with adverse vaccine reactions, massive psychological issues that we haven't even really contended with, especially with young people. Like, I could just talk for hours about how much this guy is like a festering boil on the side of humanity, and it's time we lopped that off. Although I'm not necessarily saying that we should kill the guy. All right, let's get into this. So this is an article from Gateway Pundit. Alan Dershowitz, which is this gentleman right here, is speaking out in defense of the January 6th, or is defending a January 6th accusee, somebody who was accused of wrongdoing on January 6th. And so he's got some things to say here, but really the one of the things I want to show you, excuse me, before we get into this, is some of this footage here. So let's take a look.
The following footage came from the United States Department of Justice. It contains surveillance video of the Upper West Terrace doors of the United States Capitol on January 6, 2021. Just after 2:33 p.m., police officers allowed 5 individuals to exit the Capitol through the Upper West Terrace doors.
Okay, so there's a little context here. Excuse me. So you might be wondering, like, well, what do they mean by waving people in? Because there's a difference between waving somebody in and just letting them in. But insofar as the issue at hand here, I would say that there is not a necessarily material difference. Why, you might be wondering? Well, it's because one of the ways that we enforce prohibited areas in our legal system, this is a pretty standard thing throughout the world. So we could make the case that this is probably the way it has to be done, period. And I could certainly argue that at some point, but we will do that maybe in other videos. Let's imagine this. You're sitting in front of your house. You're sitting on your porch. A whole bunch of people walk up to your house. And they clearly are about to walk in your door. The door is open. You're standing right in front of the door or right next to the door. You could, excuse me, you could, sorry about this. This doesn't normally happen. I get little like throat polyps here. So I'm just giving me like 2 minutes. I'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that. So you're standing in front of your door, a whole bunch of people coming in. You know, if they're about to go in and you say, stop, you can't come in my house, you've just established a boundary. People can't just come in. If people are about to walk in, you watch them and they just walk around in your house, you've tacitly agreed to them walking into your house. So that's the way it works. Now, in this situation, the people are coming in. They haven't showed it yet, but the people are coming in, and the guard is not saying, hey, this is a restricted area, you can't come in. He's walking out of the walkway or the walking path to allow them in, which is effectively him displaying a behavior that can be interpreted to mean that he's consenting and he's letting them inside. So let's take a look.
At 2:34 p.m., a gentleman holding an American flag catches the door just as the last protester leaves. He turns to the crowd outside and waves towards the door. At the same time, at 2:34 p.m., a gentleman with a red cap approaches the interior doors. As the police officer notices him, He continues to approach. The police officer.
So this is important. So in this scenario, you know, I was mentioning one where there's the guard is literally in front of or next to the doorway. In this scenario, the guard's inside a second set of doors, but he's clearly looking at what's happening. So in this situation, the guard just let a bunch of people out. And so you would think, hey, you know, we just had a whole bunch, this is the official story, mind you. Hey, we just had a whole bunch of people breach the Capitol, these rebels, these horrible Trump supporters. We need to get these people the hell out of here, right? You would think so if this is supposedly what was going on. You would think that the guard would first of all be notified, and second, that he'd be telling people, hey, you can't come in here, or I'm just letting people out. But that doesn't happen. The guard watches what's going on and allows, essentially, again, tacitly agrees. So when we say tacitly, it means you don't do anything to stop it. That is effectively equivalent to permission. It's acquiescence. It's tacit acceptance. So these people are coming in and the guard doesn't do anything. So from the court's perspective, you can't argue that the people stormed in when the people who are literally in charge of telling people who don't have permission to come into an area are not doing anything to stop these people from coming in. They're effectively giving them permission to come in. And that's essentially what happens in this video. I'll play a little bit more and then we'll move on.
Holds the door for the protester as he enters the Capitol.
There you go. Holding the door that says nothing. Literally holds the door for the protester.
At 2:35 p.m., a large group enters the interior of the Capitol, police standing at the doors. As a steady stream of protesters enter through the Upper West Terrace doors, they can see police officers standing at the interior doors, allowing people to pass.
So you have it. So they're allowing people to pass. I really wanted to cement that in because I haven't had the time necessarily to pour through all of the surveillance footage that is available. Apparently, there's a whole lot more that has not been made available. Pretty suspicious there. But I haven't necessarily seen it. So I'm really big on providing you guys the actual substance, the granular information. You know, it's one thing to just believe what you think somebody told you that is credible. It's another thing to believe what they told you because they're credible and you actually have the knowledge, the raw data in hand. So if somebody says, well, why do you believe it? You can actually provide your own testimony or you can bear witness. And I think that's really, really, really important. We could talk a lot about that, but I would argue that a huge number of problems in our world are because we as individuals lack substantive or granular knowledge of why we should and should not do anything. So anyway, so that's that video. Alan Dershowitz also gets into some stuff. I'll just read a little bit of what he says here in this video. It's about a 10-minute video. Alan Dershowitz says he had a First Amendment right to protest the election and he was welcomed into the Capitol. He was welcomed to the Capitol. Now, when you see that, now you know what welcomed means. It doesn't literally mean that there was a cop standing out there being like, hey guys, come in. Although in some instances that was actually happening. There is footage out there. In this instance, it's tacit, permission, at least in the video we just saw. Now, Dershowitz might be speaking about something else here. The policemen are seen in the videotape welcoming him in. It's not a crime to be welcomed into the crime after you've been waved in. He didn't hurt anybody. He left when he was told to leave. And there's been a case that's been decided just last week, which suggests that if those facts are true, there is no crime. He's talking about the acquittal that happened last week of one of the January 6th defendants. So there you have it. All right, let's get into this article. This is a huge article. I could easily spend the rest of the time talking about this, and we'd have a lot of awesome information to cover. So I'm going to suggest you read this in its entirety. This is written by the great Dr. Joseph Mercola. And what it gets into a lot of different things. It talks about why a programmable currency is so important. There's a lot we could talk about here. I'll just say that it's the reason why currency is so important for a modern society is that you need some medium of exchange. If you don't have a medium of exchange, people like to say we should go to like a purely barter and trade system. You could do that to a certain extent, but there's some serious limitations to that. And the amount of knowledge and skill that are required for individual citizens is enormous, because not only do you need to keep track of your resources at home, like, well, how much money do I need to pay my bills to buy the food I need? You also, in a barter and trade system, you need to know what everyone else that has something you need also needs, and hope that you have some of that on hand. So if you produce chickens and you want to get some, shoe work done, well, you better hope that you got the cobbler, the shoe worker, needs something that comes from chickens, like eggs or chicken meat or feathers or something like that. If they don't, now you got nothing to trade with them, which means you got nothing to offer them, which means you can't get your shoes fixed. So it creates a serious logistical problem. And currency is one of the reasons that currency was invented, we might say, is because we needed a medium of exchange. Well, for as long as there has been currencies, they've been wanting to create a programmable currency, because there's a huge amount of stuff that you can do with currency. One of the reasons we have our modern day banking system is because you can surveil the hell out of people. You can get to know somebody to such an extent that you can have profound abilities to guide human events, to create man-made weather, as Oliver Stone put it in Natural Born Killers. And with that man-made weather, you can guide all sorts of human events. So essentially what they want to do is they want to create a UBI, universal basic income. They want to create a currency where that's tied to your social credit score. Now, we already kind of have a system like that. If you do something wrong, your life will be affected by it. If you say racist things online, you potentially won't get into a job. You potentially won't get funding. You potentially have businesses that decide to not work with you because they have anti-hate speech regulation. We lost MailChimp in the summer of 2020, I believe. Yeah, it was 2020. And in the summer of 2020, and we lost Google AdSense. The reason why is because we were supposedly posting scientific and medical misinformation and hate speech. They can call hate speech whatever the hell they want, because, and this reveals the truth of what hate speech is all about. Hate speech is subjective, as anybody knows. So this is part of the things that they want to do. They want to create a programmable currency, because then they can guide and manipulate human behavior. They can rob you of your ability to use your rights in society, because they can just turn your currency off at any time. So that's something to consider. This is, again, a fantastic article. He spent so much time packing a lot of awesome information into this. So definitely get a chance to look into this. All right, we have Biden was in the middle of dumping on America when a bird dumped on him. No joke. So this kind of speaks for itself. Let's just play the video.
It's not hyperbole. It's about being made in America. A lot of that has to do with this industry.
There it is. We literally had a bird poop on him. I wish I knew what kind of bird it was. Biden was attempting to pass the inflation crisis off as being Putin's fault rather than his, and a bird did what many might have wanted to do for about a year now. It relieved itself on him while he stood there speaking. You can't make this stuff up. How often has this ever happened? Like, I don't know off the top of my head. I'm pretty curious. So if anybody knows, put it in the comments and I'll mention it next time or something like that. But, how often is a president, crapped on? Now, one of the things that would be interesting, I'll just talk a little bit about the symbolic implications. If it was an eagle is representative of America, obviously. So that's kind of a no-brainer, right? An eagle takes a poop on Mr. Biden here while he's in the middle of pooping on America. Pretty obvious. If it's a dove, which is what some people thought it was, the dove is associated with the divine feminine in Christian iconography. It's also associated with the Holy Spirit. So it's like, the spirit of truth is taking a dump on Biden, kind of revealing the fact that, hey, you got a little poo-poo on your shoulder. You should take care of that. I do think it's interesting that it's on his left shoulder. Left is associated with the left-hand path, the path of manipulation and evil and things like this, which arguably he is in alignment with. All right, so let's get into some rapid fire. Excuse me. Musk is sued by shareholders for delay in disclosing Twitter stake. I think this is indicative of the fact that the establishment is not happy about what happened, probably. I mean, we saw that guy have a meltdown last week, I believe, or maybe a couple of weeks ago now, after Musk had bought a stake in Twitter. I think this goes to show you that this is probably not something that the forces of darkness wanted to have happen. Who knows? There is some scuttlebutt around that Musk is some kind of white hat, and this is all to prepare for some grand event that's happening. I don't necessarily know if that's true, but certainly possible. That we don't know for sure what's going on, but there you have it. There's some more little breadcrumbs for us to follow. Jesse Waters, when the Dems lose the midterm elections, they'll blame Russia. In other news, the sky is blue. Like every time anything goes wrong for the Dems or the leftists or the establishment, they've been blaming Russia. And this is not new. I mean, the blame Russia thing, we didn't call it Russia back then, but effectively we were blaming Russia, at least in part, because we blamed things on the USSR. You know, we had the whole Cold War situation happen. So there's that. Probably a very interesting video. I happen to actually like Jesse a lot. When he was doing his bits on Bill O'Reilly, I didn't know who the guy was. I thought he was just some kind of frat boy. But after I saw him speak a few times, I'm like, wow, he's actually seems to know what he's talking about and has half a brain. Nolte, CNM Plus paid $300 million to attract fewer than 10K daily viewers. So apparently this is the latest in the the media rollout campaign, you know, in the sense that we have massive amounts of media, movies, TV shows, news programs, documentaries, 60-minute segments, all these kind of things that are all produced. They've been produced for years. And in broadcast television, it's produced and you broadcast it and you're done basically. You know, maybe you're getting a second level syndication. You can make a little money off of that, but that's basically it. So this whole plus thing that is exploded in the past 4 or 5 years or so, certainly in the past year or two, is indicative of this fourth industrial revolution, as Mr. Klaus Schwab likes to talk about. And the fact that it is a complete and utter failure on the part of CNN, I think, is good news. All right, former sheriff incarcerated for refusing to shut up about guardianship abuses. This is a huge story. I could make a whole 2-hour video about all this. In short, I'll let you read this on your own. This is a story of 2 men. Apparently, there was a woman who was essentially kidnapped and put into a nursing home. And the implication is that she wasn't really crazy. She didn't really have any problems necessarily. I mean, yes, she had some problems, but not enough to warrant essentially imprisoning her and putting her in a guardianship. I mean, guardianship is worse than imprisonment, because when you're in a guardianship, if you don't do what the guardian tells you, you could be sanctioned in all sorts of ways, like having your personal freedoms stripped away from you, not having access to your children, which is the thing that Britney Spears was dealing with, amongst many other things that poor woman was dealing with. I had no idea that the girl that I was making fun of back in the late 1990s and early 2000s would essentially become one of several prominent faces that is arguably helping to spread the truth about modern slavery. We'll put it that way. So this is a really good story. It recaps a lot of stuff, lots of information to pack into this about how this stuff happens. A little bit more about the underlying basis you can glean from this. It's not necessarily going to give you it's not a book, so it's not going to tell you about every single detail, but it's going to show you the seedy underbelly of something that happens in our society quite often. This is something I like to tell people and remind people when we like to think that slavery was abolished after the Civil War. It was not abolished. It was legalized. Now, there's some people who say, oh, it wasn't legalized. Come on, we didn't really do that. But literally, if you read the 13th Amendment, it literally describes an exception to slavery, that after you've been duly convicted of a crime, then slavery can still happen. Now, guardianship isn't necessarily legally convicted slavery, but it's very close to it, substantively close to it. And again, this is why I think developing a granular understanding, a substantive understanding, like if I tell you slavery is alive and well today, you should, ideally, I'm not going to have time to do it right now, but, ideally, I should lay out all of the basis as much as I can as to why I think that's the case, So then you now have the eyes to see, and you can actually see, holy crap, we do actually have slavery in the world, you know? So yeah, one of those versions, just to characterize that, by the way, or to contextualize that, is body autonomy. If you don't have body autonomy, if I can tell you, like, think about like the classic slavery scenario. You bought a slave, you bring them home, you make them clean your toilets, you make them mow your lawn, you make them pick cotton, you know, all the things that we normally think of kunta kinte kind of slavery, right? Well, that means that you don't own your body, because if you own your body, you would have the right to use your body. That's what ownership is, the right of use. If I tell you, you can't do this or you have to do that, that is effectively saying you don't own your body. I own your body. You are not in ownership of your own body, which means you're effectively a slave. So if somebody tells you, hey, guess what? You got to put a mask on. You got to inject yourself. It's a form of slavery in the sense that they're attempting to deprive you of your bodily autonomy. Now, it's different than outright, I own you, and society is going to enforce this ownership of you like we had prior to the Civil War in the United States. It's similar in substance, but not similar in kind. So yeah, there you have it. So if you haven't already done so, let me just remind everybody, go to the Stillness in the Storm homepage. Check this out. We're at the 13th of April right now. In about a week or so, I'm about 5 or 6 days before the end of the month, I'm going to reset the campaign, because we have about $2,000 in costs that all come due pretty much within the first of the month, all the way up to the 6th, 7th, 8th, something like that. So we definitely need your support. If you haven't already done so, please consider becoming a monthly contributor. For as little as $10 a month, you can support our work. You can support this news program, Vigilant News. You can support myself and Ryan as we continue to gain skills, we gain assets, you know, improve our technology, improve our production, all sorts of things. We've got awesome stuff in the pipeline. We're going to go to the Myrtle Beach event here, Time to Free America. And your contribution is going to help make that possible, so we can continue to, as Clay Clark likes to say, and by the way, there's an interview coming out here probably today, maybe tomorrow. He calls it Paul Revering. You know, remember back in the Revolutionary War, Paul Revere was really big about spreading the truth and letting people know the British are coming, the British are coming. Well, we're trying to do that right now. And I think a lot of you are trying to do that. And we're all supporting each other. So, you know, you might not have time to read endless news articles, study stuff like obsessively like me and Ryan do, but we love doing this stuff. And by contributing to us, we can work together. It's about synergy. You know, we do this aspect of it, you can do another aspect of it, and then we can combine forces together, just like a symphony orchestra, just like a military unit. And because of that, we're stronger together than we could ever be as individuals, all trying to do it all on our own. So thank you so much for that. You can also donate, of course, here directly on the page, and you can donate on Subscribestar. And lastly, we have this DHA oil campaign. This stuff is great. I've been taking it. There it is. Algae oil helps with brain health, helps with all sorts of amazing things. There's a fantastic video we have on our channel with Lance Shuttler. It was described by one of the premier researchers who was conducting a lot of research on this biochemical. It's a mega fatty acid that's allegedly more important than DNA. And there's a lot of good reasons why, but I'll let you watch that video yourself. It's fascinating. So thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Send your prayers and well wishes for Ryan. We will be back in the news for you on Friday. Until then, have a great rest of your day. Much love, and I'll see you next time. Take care.